On behalf of Care Opinion Australia and our partners, the Department of Health WA and Health Consumers Council WA, I'm pleased to warmly welcome you to this forum. This morning marks a very important milestone for your state. 10 years of having Care Opinion across Western Australia's public health system. And this is an opportunity for us today to reflect on that progress, to consider how consumers' voice continues to shape governance, culture, and improvement across the system. And before we commence our program, I would like to warmly welcome to the stage Aliyah Nestotorodis. I hope I pronounced that okay. To welcome us to country. And Aliyah is a proud young Whadjuk Noongar Yok from Bulu. She is recognised as an emerging Aboriginal leader, speaker, a strong advocate for First Nations culture, heritage and community. Aliyah comes from a line of powerful women. The female elders in her family were strong advocates for the health and well-being of Aboriginal people, helping shape the future of healthcare for their mob. Their strength, knowledge and care for community have guided Aliyah's own journey. Inspired by these role models, Aliyah has followed in her ancestors' footsteps, and in 2023, she was given the opportunity to work for Health Consumers Council as an Aboriginal Engagement Officer. And with the blessing of her elders, she has been given permission to welcome us all to country this morning. Please make welcome, Aliyah.
Kaya. Kaya. Hold on, it's a bit early. I think we need to wake the whole of Boorloo up. Kaya. I think we could do one more. Kaya. Beautiful. It's lovely to know that we are all here this morning. So Kaya, ngan kwel Aliyah, ngan wanju nunuk nija, ngan karich kuramort, nija wajak buja beket, ngan jerpen nunuk jinang nija. This morning we are here on beautiful Whadjuk Noongar Boodja with our beautiful Derbarl Yurgan just behind us. I acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar peoples. I pay respects to my elders whose feet have walked this country before my own. To those who have lived, breathed and nurtured this very Boodja that we are all here on today. We are truly blessed to have such a beautiful city to call our home, from the rivers to the coast, from the hills to the trees. I would just like to acknowledge my ancestors, elders and family. They have given me permission to be here today and to welcome you to country. Before I start, I would like to explain the difference between an acknowledgement of country and a welcome to country. An acknowledgement of country can be done by each and every one of us in this room, whereas a welcome to country can only be done by an Indigenous elder or somebody who has been given permission by a significant elder within their community. When we hear the term welcome to country, some may assume you are being welcomed to this country, Australia, which is not the case at all. Without turning this into a history lesson, the Whadjuk Noongar nations, the Noongar nations are made up of multiple different countries, somewhere similar to Europe. So the country that I welcome you all to this morning is Whadjuk Noongar Boodja. My name is Aliyah Nestotorodis. Thank you, Tina, for pronouncing all of our Noongar words as well. And I'm a Kolbang Parfit from Narrogin, a small town southeast of Perth. I'm also Macedonian Māori, so multiculturalism is also on my side. Majority of my family were born in Narrogin, and I'm pretty much related to the whole state. So my family bloodline runs all across the southwest of Western Australia, and it scatters up north, connecting me throughout the state. I descend from the Whadjuk, Wilman, Menang, Gorang, Balladong, Bibbulmun, and Wadandi tribes within the Noongar Nation, so basically related to everyone. As we are all gathered here this morning, I want to share a bit of a story with you all. Back in the day, long, long ago, the Noongar peoples lived along this river. The Derbarl Yurgan, Swan River, was home to many Noongar families. Our people have lived along the river since the beginning of time. It was full of stories, life, and knowledge. The Wargle, rainbow serpent dreaming, belongs to this area. The Wargle is the creator of our skies, our waterways, our hills, and the land. As he made his way throughout the Derbarl Yurgan, Swan River, his body pushed up. So if you have a look on a bird's eye view of our Derbarl Yurgan or Swan River, it looks a little bit like a snake. Boordiers, elders, would use songlines to educate and navigate our Kulungas, children, all throughout the city of Perth or Boorloo. They would walk up and down this budja land every day to get from Mudugara, just across from us, Harrison Island, all the way up St George's Terrace to the top of the hill, Karagarp or Karakumba, Kings Park. So up on the hill, Karakumba or Karagarp, was where majority of our women's business happened. It was a major birthing ground for our peoples. One of my 3 times back great-grandmothers was born up under a eucalyptus tree up on that hill, along with many other Whadjuk families from the Swan River colony. When I feel the need to be grounded, I'd march my way up to that hill, I'd walk all the way up to a tree and I'd just drop and lay on that grass. There was always coolbardies, magpies, and kookaburras flying past, just roaming around sussing out who's there. Growing up, we were always taught that our elders come back to us in the presence of animals. So those birds flying past could have been many of my ancestors or elders watching over me. So on the other side of the river over here, we've got Harrison Island or Mudugara. This is where a lot of men's business happened. As a child, I spent a lot of time there when they had the Noongar Tent Embassy. That was where a lot of my family and many of others would come together. Me, my cousins and I would all swim in this river. We'd laugh all day, play with the jellyfish and throw mud at one another. This river flows throughout my heart like the blood in my veins. And this just shows the significant connection to country that First Nations peoples have here with the land. Beneath these concrete buildings and streets, you'll find tracks that lead back to the footprints of our people, of our native animals, and the native soil that lay beneath our feet. It is important that we acknowledge the budja land we are on, our ancestors who have come before us, and to share this Kadajan knowledge with each other. Because we all come from many different walks of life, but at the end of the day, we all share and call this city our home. So when you make your way throughout the city that we all call home, take a moment to appreciate, reflect, and acknowledge. History will always be with us, forever in our hearts, whether it was my old people living here long ago or all of us coming here together this morning. And I'd just like to acknowledge one of my very dear elders who has passed on, Dr. Margaret Colbong, rest in peace. Like mentioned earlier from Tina, she spent her whole life fighting for the health and wellbeing of Aboriginal peoples here in WA and received an honorary doctorate for 50 years of service in that area. So because of people like her, there's opportunities for people like me to step up and follow along. So I'd just like to thank Tina and the Care Opinion team, Health Consumers Council, and for all of you being here today. Yanka Budawan, thank you, and see you later.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Aaliyah, for that warm welcome and for sharing your personal reflections and connections to land. I would also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk Noongar people as the traditional custodians of the land in which we meet today, and pay my respects to their elders past and present. And with that, I would also like to welcome all the friends who are joining us online from across WA, Queensland, Victoria, and any other states. Welcome. Now for some fun housekeeping before we get serious. So any guests with dietary requirements should make themselves known to the wait staff. Please ensure that you do that so that you can be easily identified during the meal refreshment times. There's no smoking permitted at the venue, including the terrace. So guests, if you'd like to have a smoke, downstairs, outside. The toilets are located on the right down the corridor, as are two exits to the right. And if there were to be an evacuation, assembly is at the grass area downstairs. Now I would like to just take a few minutes, about 10 minutes or so, just to go through a few kind of highlights around care opinion and some data. Go back. Okay. So many of you are familiar with care opinion, so I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of how it works, but just as a summary, care opinion has been in Australia since 2012 and in the UK since 2005. WA was the first state to adopt care opinion, and successful pilots were completed between 2015 and 2017 across WA Country Health Services, or WACS region, leading to a state-wide adoption thereafter. In 2018, WA health service providers were expected to use Care Opinion platform as part of the ministerial statement of expectation to enhance systematic patient feedback mechanisms. And it has been meaningfully used and adopted since. And we're here today to celebrate that, but also to look at ways in which we can enhance engagement and bring more value to consumers' voice. Today, Care Opinion is in Scotland, Northern Ireland, Australia and Canada, in hospitals, in aged care, disability, as well as community services. They actually use it in primary care as well overseas. What makes Care Opinion different is that it's a relational two-way feedback mechanism. So a story or narrative is shared by consumers, providing rich insights because the consumer shares what they want to share, what matters to them. Where traditional surveys, the health service puts forward questions that matter to them. It's not really what the consumer is wanting to share. You're guided to respond based on the needs of the provider. Therefore, these stories or narratives capture real-time actionable insights where services can then take the feedback and implement changes as part of their regular quality improvement systems and processes, promoting continuous quality, a learning health system that's responsive to the patient's needs. And in Western Australia, we are seeing different ways in which it's used. So it'll be really great today to get some insights around how you're bringing value to your consumers in the way you're changing your services in response to their needs. Just go back. So, yeah, just a summary of the number of stories that you have in WA, and more importantly, over 6.5 million views of this story. So 6.5 million people have viewed these stories, which is quite powerful if you look at your state. On the far right-hand side, you will see the criticality of these stories, and right at the bottom, you'll notice there's 55% are purely positive stories being shared, which is quite powerful in its own right, reinforcing the great work our frontline staff are providing to consumers, and what people are saying about Care Opinion or about their experience of care is a lot of it has to do with the with the care teams, the professionalism of the care team, the support that they give them, the conduct, their behavioural treatment, and how helpful they are. And some areas that could be improved are around wait times, more information, becoming a bit more person-centred, listening to the consumer, and the overall clinical treatment. So care opinion is a powerful feedback mechanism when used well. So it enables continuous improvement, contributing to the quadruple aim in healthcare. So it operationalises quadruple aim by embedding the patient voice in everyday practice, creating feedback loops that drive real-time change, strengthening the relationship between consumers and the care team, improving the well-being of the care team through the positive feedback that's shared, enabling targeted improvements, supporting value-based healthcare where patients' insights are shared, again, reinforcing what matters to them. And you will see here the different ways in which it supports the quadruple aim, so where people or consumers, patients are able to share their story and what matters to them, they have a better experience of care. They feel heard. Where staff receive positive feedback and recognition, it boosts morale. So there's care team wellbeing. And then in terms of the population, it identifies safety issues, areas of improvement within the care that's provided, and these aggregated real-time patterns that emerge from the stories inform redesign, improvements, and it complements the clinical data, giving more of a complete picture, improving care outcomes for the population. And identifying inefficiencies, enabling targeted improvements, reducing complaints, all of this supports value-based care and reducing the overall cost of the healthcare system. And so by strengthening person-centred care, building trust and engagement with consumers and patients, by promoting the well-being of our care teams and being able to show how the population health of your state is improving is quite powerful, and all of that should start to work in improving the overall efficiency of your health system, including reductions in the cost of care. You should be able to see this if it is used in a meaningful way and used in conjunction with other feedback mechanisms. So I was sharing earlier with some of the attendees how across different states, you see patient surveys are being implemented, and as part of the AgPower group of companies, we have a company that CFEP surveys that does PREMs and PROMs, so patient-reported experience measures and outcomes, and being able to systematically obtain feedback through surveys which have their place. But there is no mechanism more powerful than obtaining feedback than stories and narratives, not only from the patient, but from their carers and those who are accompanying them and supporting them. So today is about hearing from you, how you're using it, how value is being brought to your services and to your consumers and the population, hearing ways in which we can improve the value of the feedback mechanism, and seeing what the next decade of consumer feedback looks like and co-creating that together so we can do better to support you in supporting your consumers. So with that, I would like to now take the opportunity to invite the Minister, the Honourable Meredith Hammett, Minister for Health and Mental Health. Minister Hammett has shown strong leadership in supporting a health system that values transparency, learning and the voice of consumers and carers. We are very appreciative of your presence here this morning and your support in this important milestone for WA. So please join me in welcoming the Minister to deliver her opening address.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and it's great to be here with you this morning. I would like to begin by acknowledging we meet on the lands of the Whadjuk Noongar people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Aaliyah, thank you for that wonderful welcome this morning. I really enjoyed hearing about your experiences as a young person playing in the river and what the natural landscape here in the heart of Perth means for you. I'm often struck by how beautiful Perth is, and it's impossible not to appreciate that great natural beauty. As we meet here today on the banks of the Derbarl-Yerrigan, I think WA is one of the most beautiful places in the world. And so I do want to acknowledge the care and custodianship that First Nations people have had for our land for more than 65,000 years, which means we can all appreciate it today. But thank you to you all for being here this morning for what I am sure will be a really important discussion and an important focus on patient experiences. It really is a great pleasure for me to have the opportunity to join you this morning, particularly as we're celebrating 10 years of Carers Opinion. So 10 years of commitment, 10 years of engaging, 10 years of being committed to hearing the voices of consumers and carers in our health system. So this is an important forum to reflect, but to acknowledge and recognise and also celebrate how those open conversations and how that collaboration have contributed to improvements in our system and bring a stronger focus right across our system on person-centred care. Now, it won't surprise you to hear that as Health Minister, I get a lot of feedback all the time about our health system. In fact, many of it is very positive. People take the opportunity, obviously, to write to my office, they email. I now have friends that share all manner of stories about their experiences in the health system with me, and some acquaintances that I hardly know as well. But I think what it underlines is, and I've got to say, overwhelmingly, those stories are positive. Not always. People do also give me feedback about ways to improve. But the passion and commitment with which people talk about their experiences in our public health system strike me on every occasion. And whether those experiences have been extremely positive, whether they are making the point that they'd like to see some improvements, people feel very strongly about our public health system, about the care that they receive, and about the importance it has in their lives and in their families' lives as well. And I'm not telling you anything that you don't know. Health touches everyone's life. And we don't know how important it is until we need it. And at that point, there's nothing more important. And that's why our government is committed to improving healthcare experiences for Western Australians. We've made it one of our top priorities, that having access to the healthcare that you need, one of our top 3 priorities for people in Western Australia. And of course, we know that a large part of delivering quality care centres around the patient. And it starts with the patient feeling heard, feeling respected and feeling supported. And that's why the work of Care Opinion is so important to our health system as well, because it does allow for that feedback that people wish to make to come through a structured engagement as well. And of course, we know that by getting in feedback, that's how we can enhance healthcare experiences, by being open to that feedback, by having transparent and honest conversations with people as well. As healthcare providers, listening and acting on feedback will help us deliver better patient outcomes, better clinical outcomes. It'll improve efficiency, and it will, of course, strengthen quality and safety right across our system. But most importantly, it supports us embedding a culture of continuous improvement. So one where people and their experiences lie at the heart of our health system all the time. Now this, it won't surprise you to know that many of you will be aware that I was involved in the Sustainable Health Review as one of the employee reps on that panel, in fact, at the time, along with representatives from the Health Consumers Council. And one of the first strategies outlined was about committing and collaborating to address major public health issues. And so the WA health system has remained committed to that since becoming a supporter of Care Opinion in 2017 and being committed to collaborating with consumer voices to deliver that patient-centred healthcare that was such an important part of the Sustainable Health Review. Recommendation 4 of the review makes it clear that we must commit to new approaches that support citizen and community partnership in the design, in the delivery and evaluation of sustainable health and social care services and the reported outcomes. And a key priority under this recommendation is to continue developing the use of Care Opinion as a way of listening to and engaging with consumers, carers and the community. And as the point has already been made this morning, understanding the personal stories and the personal reflections that people tell about what their care meant for them and what it meant for their family. Because it's only through having this genuine conversation that we can become better as a health system, how we can incorporate that informed, compassionate care in everyday services. We want West Australians to be empowered to share their personal experiences across health and the social sectors, to share it with service providers so that they're able to openly read and respond to and learn from that feedback. So this demonstrates our system-wide commitment, our government commitment to open conversation, to transparency and to continuous improvement. And particularly, it underlines our commitment to the powerful role that lived and living experience plays in strengthening how we deliver care to the people of Western Australia. For every experience that's shared, it contributes to a better and a broader understanding of what our community needs, and it reinforces the very important role that patient voices must play in our healthcare system. So today is an important point to stop and reflect on the 10-year journey that has been the partnership with Care Opinion. So thank you all for being here today and making this a priority in what I know are very busy roles, very busy lives that you all have. I do want to thank the organisers for bringing us all together today. It is an opportunity to celebrate, but to reflect about what still needs to be done. So I'm very pleased that we've got the opportunity to support today's forum. Care Opinions nurtured that safe environment for health service providers and for consumers to listen and be heard. And I look forward to the continued work we will do together in improving healthcare experiences for West Australians, because I know that together we can continue to strengthen person-centred care and we can deliver meaningful, lasting improvements for our community as a whole. Thank you for your time in being here today. Enjoy the networking, the reflection, the celebration, but most importantly, thank you for your commitment to making sure that we are delivering person-centred care in Western Australia and ensuring that West Australians can access the care they need, no matter who they are, no matter where they live in this great state. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Minister, for your address and for your leadership and commitment to consumers and to the consumer voice and to delivering high quality person-centred care and for your commitment in being here. The Minister does have to leave, has another commitment to go to. So please join me in thanking her for being here this morning. We will now turn our attention to a very special recording of a presentation by Fraser Gilmore. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Care Opinion in the UK, who's graciously provided a pre-recorded presentation for us in light of the time difference. He did offer to join live, but we were kind to him, and he's done it before. He's in all hours of the morning or night, but in this occasion we felt that it would be more appropriate to have a recording. So Fraser oversees the successful implementation of Care Opinion across England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, as well as the international partnerships like Australia and Canada. As Care Opinion marks its 20th year in the UK, Fraser leads the organisation with a clear belief that stories have a power to improve care. He sees each story shared on the platform as an opportunity for reflection, for dialogue and improvement. Under his leadership, Care Opinion continues to strengthen its role as an independent bridge between people and services, supporting healthcare organisations to respond openly, learn visibly, and build trust through transparency and engagement. So with that, if we're able to turn on the recording, that would be wonderful. Thank you.
Hello everyone, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this important event. Although I'm speaking to you from here in the UK, it's a real privilege to be joining you in celebrating 10 years of Care Opinion in Western Australia. That's 10 years of listening to people who use health and care services, 10 years of staff responding, and 10 years of stories travelling through the system and helping improve care. Now, before I go any further, I want to recognise the many people who have made Care Opinion part of the health system in Western Australia. To my colleagues in the Care Opinion team in Australia, and to everyone across health services, consumer organisations, and the wider community who have supported this work over the past decade, thank you. What you're celebrating today reflects 10 years of commitment to listening and learning from the voices of patients, families and carers. Across the UK, across Australia, and increasingly across other countries like Canada and Ireland, Care Opinion has grown because it provides a simple but powerful idea. It allows people to share their experience of care in their own words, and it allows organisations and staff to respond openly. I often describe Care Opinion in a very practical way. Technology helps people speak, but people help healthcare listen. And when that happens well, stories begin to travel through organisations and help care improve. Since our founding just over 20 years ago, we've seen hundreds of thousands of stories shared through Care Opinion here in the UK about our National Health Service and other health and care organisations. Some celebrate extraordinary care, others highlight problems or frustrations, and many do both. But what they all do is show us something that we cannot see through dashboards or performance indicators. They show us what care actually felt like. One colleague in the UK reflected on this beautifully when they talked about their work in radiology. They said that in departments where interactions are brief and fast-paced, Care Opinion has opened a valuable window into the patient journey, allowing us to celebrate what we do well and identify where we can do better. Now that matters because healthcare is not only about treatments and outcomes, it's about relationships, trust, dignity and compassion. When organisations first encounter Care Opinion, one concern often comes up. People sometimes say, well, because the stories are anonymous, we can't do anything with them. But that misses the point. Care Opinion is not primarily about investigating individual cases. Health systems already have processes for that. Its purpose is to help organisations listen, learn, and respond to the experiences people are sharing. When a story is shared, the most important question is not, can we identify the patient? The most important question is, what is this story telling us? And what does it reveal about communication, compassion, or the experience of navigating services? When organisations respond thoughtfully to stories, something powerful happens. Patients, families, and carers feel heard. Staff see the impact of their work through the eyes of the people they care for. And leaders gain insight into culture and experience that traditional data simply cannot provide. Across the NHS in the UK and health and care services here, we've seen Care Opinion stories used in many ways. Teams read stories together and reflect on what they can learn. Boards use them to ground discussions about quality and real experiences. Positive feedback is shared with staff to support morale and well-being. And Care Opinion stories are used widely to improve, design and redesign services based on what matters to patients. One senior healthcare official once said to me that care opinion had changed the way they thought about quality. The data tells us what's happening. The stories tell us what it feels like. Stories also lead directly to improvement. And one member of staff recently described it like this. Care opinion gives us a unique opportunity not just to listen, but to act. Whether it's celebrating what's going well or learning from what could be improved, every story is a chance to grow and continue delivering person-centred care. To use the Scottish National Health Service as an example, over the past year, we have seen services make a wide range of changes because of stories shared through care opinion. In one service, patients shared how difficult it was to understand appointment letters. There was too much jargon and too much uncertainty about what would happen next. The team worked with patients to redesign the letters so they were clearer and easier to follow. In another example, people described how stressful it could be waiting for care without knowing what was happening. That feedback led the teams to improve how they communicate while people were waiting. They provided clearer information and more regular updates. And in another service, stories from patients and families highlighted how uncertain people can feel when leaving hospital. Staff responded by improving how discharge information is shared so patients feel more confident about what is happening next. None of these changes are large on their own, but they come directly from what people experienced. Across hundreds or thousands of stories, those small improvements begin to add up to something much bigger. A health system that continually learns from the people it serves. Care opinion also supports staff in a very human way. Healthcare professionals work incredibly hard, yet too often they only hear about problems. Care opinion allows positive stories of care to travel. One healthcare staff member in Scotland described it in a way that I'll never forget. They said, "One of my favourite parts of using care opinion is that little ping in my inbox when a new story arrives. It reminds me that someone has taken the time to share their experience. Every story is unique, teaches us something different, and truly matters." These stories remind staff why they chose healthcare in the first place. And in some organisations, teams have even created small traditions around this. One hospital gives a mug to staff who are named positively in care opinion stories more than 5 times. It sounds small, but those mugs became something people were incredibly proud of. We've seen other organisations create certificates, badges, and finding other ways to celebrate colleagues through blogs and newsletters, because they represent the difference those staff made to patients, families, and carers. When I visited Western Australia back in November, one thing that really struck me was the seriousness with which people were approaching this work and the stories they were responding to. Across Western Australia, we're seeing health services do exactly that and continue to deepen and strengthen the work. Stories are being read, staff are responding thoughtfully, and learning is being shared. Over the past 10 years, the teams here in Western Australia have helped create the foundations for that culture. Thousands of stories have been shared by patients, families, and carers, and thousands of responses have been written by staff who took the time to listen and reply. Every story represents a moment of care. Taken individually, they are small windows into healthcare. Together, they create a living picture of care across the system. Looking ahead, the question is not simply how many stories are shared. The real question is how deeply those stories are used. In many places in the UK, the next phase of the care opinion journey will be about embedding stories more deeply into organisations, ensuring they reach frontline teams, encouraging responses from those who provide care, and bringing narrative feedback together with other forms of data. In other words, moving from collecting stories to learning from stories at scale. Western Australia is already well on that journey. The partnerships between health services, the Department of Health, the Health Consumers Council, and Care Opinion are incredibly important because they make narrative feedback part of how healthcare systems listen. Western Australia is not alone in this approach. In the UK, we've seen something similar develop in Scotland and in Northern Ireland, where Care Opinion is now used across the whole health system. In both places, the platform has become part of the infrastructure of listening. Stories are shared across the entire system. Staff respond openly. Learning is shared across organisations. Because of that, Scotland and Northern Ireland have become points of inspiration for the rest of the UK. They show us that listening to every story is not something that happens in one service. It can happen at scale across an entire health system. And what's exciting is that is what Western Australia is doing. And I'm happy to say you're joining this group with Scotland and Northern Ireland. In many ways, Western Australia is definitely sitting alongside both those countries as beacons of good practice, demonstrating what it looks like when health systems commit to listening openly and learning from the experiences of people they serve. As you celebrate 10 years of Care Opinion in Western Australia today, I hope this is a moment and an opportunity to think about what the next 10 years looks like. How might staff engage even more deeply with patient voices? How might stories support workforce culture and well-being? How might narrative feedback sit alongside other intelligence to shape better care? Because in the end, that's what care is really about. Not technology, not platforms, but people. People sharing their experiences, people responding with compassion, and healthcare systems learning story by story how to do better. 10 years ago, Western Australia began a journey built on a simple idea that people's stories matter. Today, Western Australia stands alongside Scotland and Northern Ireland as a place showing what it looks like when a health system truly commits to listening. And I have no doubt that the work that you're doing will continue to inspire others across Australia, across the UK, and internationally. Thank you for the work that you're doing, and congratulations again on 10 years of listening, learning, and improving care through the power of people's stories.
Could you feel
Hello,
his,
everyone, and thank you for inviting.
feel his energy and passion? It was just jumping out at us. Thank you so much, Fraser, for taking the time to record such a wonderful, inspiring presentation for us and sharing the invaluable insights on how Care Opinion has grown in the UK, in Ireland, in Scotland, and how its impact is being felt across the health system. I think it's really important to hear these examples and how it's being utilised. So some of these specific examples that he shared are ones I'm sure you're familiar with, and we'll hear a lot more about how Care Opinion stories are being used in WA. But this opportunity for exchange, so you can learn from each other on bringing more value with what the stories are telling us, I think is really important. And there may be sometimes missed opportunities for that between health services. And really the next stage or the next iteration of patient or consumer stories in WA is how do we embed it in more and more health services, and how do we ensure that more and more staff have access to the patient stories and are using it to improve the services that they provide. So it is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Leslie Bennett. Dr. Bennett is the Deputy Director General, Clinical Excellence Division at the Department of Health. Before joining the department, Dr. Bennett held the position of Executive Director at the Royal Perth Bentley Group at East Metropolitan Health Service. Dr. Bennett is a practicing physician and is recognised for her leadership in clinical governance, safety and quality, workforce wellbeing and service transformation. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bennett.
Thank you, Tina, for that warm welcome. And good morning, everyone. And thank you, Aaliyah, for that very personal and fascinating welcome to country. And I would also like to acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation as the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet, and to pay respects to elders past and present. And to acknowledge a continuing connection to land, sea and community, and the importance of listening to voices that have for too long gone unheard. So thank you to Care Opinion for Australia for bringing us together as part of Patient Awareness Week and providing me to speak here at such an important milestone. 10 years of listening, learning and improving together. And thank you to everyone here for your ongoing commitment, your time, your care and the energy to hearing and responding to voices of patients, carers and communities. I stepped into this role from my role in East Metro in January this year. And one of the strongest personal commitments I brought with me was the belief that the health system only improves when we genuinely listen to the people it exists to serve. Clinical evidence is not only about evidence-based pathways, about protocols, about metrics. It's really about understanding what it feels like to receive care, to navigate our systems when you're feeling frightened and vulnerable, either as a patient or as a relative or caring for someone that you love. And that belief has shaped one of the early priorities for my division, building a culture that truly hears and acts on the patient, carer and family voice. In March, we began rolling out What Matters to You work across WA Health. At its heart, it's very simple. Instead of asking what's the matter with you, we encourage clinicians and carers and other staff to ask what matters to you. That is a transformative conversation, and it turns the question around for people to answer, if we listen, around what they value, what they fear, what they hope for, and what good care actually looks like from their perspective. And as we know, and as we've heard today, it's different for different people. For some people, it's dignity. For others, it's cultural safety. For others, it's keeping their family close, being involved in their decisions. And for some, it's simply being heard. These conversations are only the beginning. The real value comes when we keep listening across all aspects of our health system, not just within WA Health, but outside. And that's where Care Opinion plays such a powerful role. So I was pleased the Minister mentioned today one of the portfolios in the Sustainable Health Review that I now sponsor, which really is around the importance of community partnerships in the design, delivery and the evaluation of healthcare services. And we know this is a direction that we need to move in WA Health, not just for health to be financially sustainable, but for our outcomes to improve and to deliver care that our patients want. It's not optional work, it's foundational to a sustainable, equitable health system. We've heard a lot of times today that WA Health exists to serve every Western Australian every day. And the only way that we can do that well is by actively learning from the lived experience of people who use our services. We also know we have a lot of variation at the moment in access and in outcomes in our healthcare system. So we have quite a bit of work to do. We also know from good evidence now, and I will use some stories or some data from NHS Scotland. So NHS Scotland rolled out What Matters to You, and they have shown consistently that outcomes improve for patients. So falls in the aged care ward reduced by 50%, their complaints reduced dramatically. We know that resources are used more effectively, and services are much more relevant to what the community wants. We have to remember that listening well is also critically important for people who have historically been missed or marginalised. And in WA, I know we are all aware of our responsibility to engage meaningfully with Aboriginal people, people living with disability, culturally and linguistically diverse communities, and people who identify as LGBTQIA+. And we know that true engagement is not one size fits all. It requires culturally safe approaches, accessible feedback pathways, and the genuine willingness to hear feedback that may be uncomfortable but necessary. And feedback is not about a complaint system, it's about whole system learning. We know that when people hear that they're doing well, it matters deeply, particularly in a highly pressurized environment. And we also know that when people tell us where care fell short, we have an opportunity for improvement. Care opinion is one of the many ways in which people can share feedback, and we have to be respectful that people have different ways that they want to feedback. There is communication with staff. We have our liaison services. We have surveys. Some people want to write emails. Some of the older generation, as I'm sure you've seen, like to write 3-page letters in handwriting. And I think it's really important that all avenues are available to people. But platforms like Care Opinion are really important, and the anonymous component provides something unique. So Care Opinion has now been part of the WA Health journey for a decade. And as we heard, it was first introduced here in 2016, and it was endorsed through the Sustainable Health Review to become a real trusted and transparent way for people to share their experiences publicly, and also for services to respond openly and thoughtfully. And we've heard the word transparency a lot today, and that public exchange matters. Transparency builds trust. It demonstrates accountability to us as healthcare providers, and it shows that as a system we are willing to listen and act. And the stories that raise challenges are equally valuable as those that celebrate extraordinary care. So what next? So this forum has been a bit about reflection on the last 10 years. But for us, as we celebrate 10 years of being in this space and for being a system that is committed to becoming more person-centered, we need to ask ourselves, how do we deepen that impact? I'm talking to a room of the converted. How do we get the engagement deeper? How do we really get the culture of the importance of listening to patients across our organizations? That's our roles, and we have to think about how we do that as leaders. How do we then align that with system priorities? How do we pull that together? And the reality is, how do we create a business case for government to invest in this area? We have to be able to demonstrate value. There has to be something that Treasury is going to commit to. And how do we continue to empower consumers and carers to partner in our improvement? How do we enable them? How do we make them comfortable in our space so that we are hearing them and providing them the right platform to educate us? I'll finish where I started. Healthcare is at its best when consumer, carer, and community perspectives sit at the centre, not at the margins. And feedback is not an add-on. It's essential to safety, quality, and sustainability. So as we mark 10 years of listening, I invite all of us as leaders, clinicians, advocates, and partners to keep asking, what matters to the people that we serve, and how are we responding? Thank you, and I look forward to the conversations ahead.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bennett, for sharing your reflections and setting the scene for today's discussions. There's a lot there for us to build on as we move into the panel sessions throughout the day. And I think the What Matters to You initiative that you have is really at the heart of Care Opinion. And if we truly are listening to what matters to the consumers, No doubt we will influence their experience of care and it will lead to better health outcomes. So with that, I would like to move to our first panel discussion and explore how consumers' voice is being embedded in governance and engagement and what that looks like in practice across the different parts of the health system. We're joined by a panel bringing a range of perspectives from across the system, from executive leadership through to lived experience. Joining us today, we have Alicia Michelini, Executive Director, Goldfields. So if you would like to make your way to the stage, Alicia. We have Sarah Louise Lang, Acting Executive Director, Armidale Kalamunda Group. We have Gloria Jacob, Chairperson, East Pilbara District Health Advisory Council. We also have joining us Richard Newman, Chief Executive Officer, Carers WA. Please make them welcome. Yeah, come and sit nice and close. That's it. Okay, welcome to our panelists. And I do have a set of questions which I can start with, and then as we're going through these questions and responses, please think of any other questions that you may have that you would like to ask all of them, or anyone specifically as well. So we might start with Gloria, if that's okay. Sorry, Gloria.
It's okay, Tina. How are you?
Good, thank you. Welcome. So before we start, just to give you some context, over 6,000 stories published on Care Opinion relate to experiences with wax, with over 60% of those being wholly positive. We also often hear from consumers that they were encouraged by staff to share their stories. From your perspective, what is it about the way Care Opinion is being used in wax, including how frontline staff are engaging with it, that has led to so many people sharing their stories?
Thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today. Thank you very much for giving consumers a voice on this panel. I guess why people feel they can share is largely based around Care Opinion is viewed, I suppose, more of a feedback mechanism, an invite to provide your stories, provide your feedback, rather than a complaint system. And I think it works, Fraser mentioned it, in whole with other mechanisms, because not everybody, Care Opinion is a digital platform, but not coming from the Pilbara in particular, not everybody communicates in that way. But the staff, encouraging feedback helps a lot. And with regards to staff, the frontline staff in particular are key to this. If they feel like they can encourage people and use that feedback as not a complaint, but more of a continuous improvement, they allow people to tell our stories in our words and feel like there's confidence in the system that somebody is listening. So that is really important. And I guess when the staff, especially in the responses, and Alicia, your responses are key, they feel like they're being listened to. Our stories are being listened to. The service is reflecting on what we're telling them. And then we're respected as well. So there's respect happening with that. And I think key to this is also the anonymity, that Care Opinion. We don't have to identify ourselves. We can say it in our words. We feel there's confidence for us to tell our stories. So I think that's chief.
That's wonderful. So really, your staff embrace obtaining the feedback, and by welcoming the feedback, it's increasing consumers and encouraging them to share openly. So building on that, Alicia, when services invite people to continue the conversation offline after sharing their story, we often see quite different levels of people being willing to make contact. What has your experience been, and what do you think influences whether people take that next step?
Thanks. I think that interestingly, it's this part of it is the structure of the service itself. So as we know, Care, excuse me, Care Opinion is an anonymous feedback platform, as you mentioned, Gloria, but it's actually still allows two-way communication. So oftentimes we can receive, you know, one of the feedback forms, a letter, and it'll say, you know, please, there's no need to respond, and it can even be done anonymously. But Care Opinion actually still allows for that two-way communication to take place straight away. As has been mentioned today, overwhelmingly, so much of the feedback that we get on Care Opinion is positive. And in fact, even it can be mixed. So we can get from one story, we can get some positive feedback and some negative feedback all at once. So what I found though is when I've spoken to people that have reached out afterwards, is I realised that there's quite often so much fear from the consumer, from the carer, or from the community member in raising and telling their story. And Care Opinion really does give them that opportunity to tell it in their own words and to really ensure that it's put straight through to the health service and for everybody to see. I've had the experience where most of the people that have reached out afterwards were actually the critical 4 and 5 stories. So most commonly, it's the people that have had a really difficult and challenging and hard experience that they've come forward and told us about. And I think that the platform actually allows for us to respond in a way where we're not defensive. We get straight to we've heard you, and we would actually like to see that improve. And it still has a personalisation element, even though it's anonymous. It's still quite incredible. I find, you know, I hit the read aloud function, and I find actually every time I read a response, it feels like a person is reaching out and speaking. And I always, you know, make a point of reading aloud my responses so I can actually think, what's it like for the person hearing this if I actually listen to what they've had to say. And so I think that platform and that two-way communication really supports it. And people have wanted to reach out and be heard. And from then what I found is that often I will go into you know, meeting with people. And like I said, most of the people that I've had reach out are the Crit 4-5 stories. So they have had a really difficult experience. And often there's a lot of fear about them coming and speaking to people from the health service, and even more so returning and re-engaging with the health service. And so, you know, opening that communication and following it through. Oftentimes I'd always want to come up with the solution of how do I fix this, or how do I find the answer that actually it didn't really happen that way. And that was, you know, just of a personal, like that's often the time you came to. But having been through the experience a few times, what I found now is just listening, and most people just want to be heard. They just want to tell their experience. They just want to hear that, I'm sorry that it happened to you. Thank you for coming forward. I always think I'm sorry and thank you are 2 ways to open and close every conversation. But what you find when you're talking with them and hearing about what has mattered and what it has meant, solutions, improvements and positive steps really do come to the fore. We've had people that have had exceptionally difficult birth experiences, and out of that we now have a debriefing clinic that's offered to every woman that comes in that has had a you know, an emergency event or difficult part of their birthing experience, and the uptake and the feedback that's led to positive feedback again and again and again. So there can be really big changes that advocate for the service. And that's the other thing, the people that have had such difficult experience, I've seen on Facebook on our community pages, because I know who they are now because I was working with them, advocating and saying, just reach out, put a Care Opinion post, someone will get in touch, someone will help you with your next step the next time you want to engage with the service. So these people that had such a difficult experience now become the biggest advocates for their local community, their local consumers and their local health services, and I found that very wonderful.
Thank you for sharing that and also for closing the loop. So sharing an example of how change from a negative experience leads to positive experience for those thereafter. That's a really nice segue to the next question for Sarah Louise. When stories come through and you're responding to these stories, what approach do you take to ensure your response feels genuine and person-centered?
Thank you. Thanks for the question. So I think the most important thing for me is, reading through the story and just sitting in the space, actually. I think hearing the information from our consumers, our patients, our carers, it's very meaningful to hear it in this way. And what I try to do with, of course, our patient experience teams and our quality and safety teams around how we respond is getting to the core of the issue. So I think everyone will provide their narrative in their own way. And so really scrutinising what people will provide, because they will do it in a different way and everyone communicates differently. So trying to understand what that means and get to the core issue. And I think it's always important for me to ensure that we convey a very genuine empathy and concern and acknowledgement of whatever has been provided, whether it's positive feedback, whether it's concern about their care, and just, I think, responding in a meaningful way so that people feel heard. That's the most important thing, I feel. If required, I will ask questions. I think it's important sometimes to get to the core of the issue. And I know it's not about individual patient stories sometimes, and it's about hearing what people are saying. But sometimes I think it is important to go back and ask the question. It's one of our tools in our tool belt and how we can hear what people are saying. So I think it's important to go back there. Yeah, so they're the main things. And I think looking overall in our response, a very empathetic and meaningful response is important.
Thanks, Sarah Louise. And I think we'll delve into that a little bit more later. I mean, it's one thing to try and be empathetic in your response and person-centered, but what has it taken to be able to build the skills, the confidence, I suppose experience in being able to do that well?
Oh, I guess it sort of comes from all my experience dealing with consumers in the clinical space, but also hearing from our teams and how they work. And like I say, sitting in the space, I think if you're able to convey that in the way you're delivering the written word back, it takes experience and sort of leaning into that to convey the message. I like what you were just saying about the hearing the words. I think I'm going to use that tool. I think that was really
such a good tool.
That was a really good method. I think reading things, you can hear things and try and see in between the words as well. And I think that would really help with that message.
Even reading your response, your own out loud, to see how it would actually come out if you were to convey that verbally. Yeah, it's really powerful. Thank you. And Richard, bringing the carer perspective, how can health services ensure they are upholding carers' rights to be recognised and heard while appropriately navigating confidentiality when responding to the feedback and stories?
Thanks, Tina. That's pretty much a layered question, so I wonder if I could probably layer the answer. First of all, it's about grounding in carer reality, and carers are often the constant between a system that can seem periodic or sporadic or even fragmented. And so they quite often notice changes within systems more than people who actually work in those systems. So they're a rich source of intelligence, and I think we should look at that feedback loop as a source of intelligence rather than just perhaps people telling us their thoughts and their feelings as well. So when we look at the rights and the recognition, it's, and as we hear this all the time, but it's vitally important that we actually explicitly ask people for their feedback. Quite often it's taken as a given. We have a mechanism for gaining it or obtaining it, but we don't actually articulate that explicitly we want people to be part of that process. And it should never be seen as a barrier, and quite often we use confidentiality and privacy as a barrier by saying we can't explain or we can't expose too much information. It shouldn't be used as a barrier, it should be used as a workaround, I think. Saying things we can't share details, but this is what we see and this is what we're hearing. Is that correct? And also responding to feedback well. It is about closing that loop. It is about circling back to what the original issues and concerns are about. So carers are often seen as a peripheral in that caring relationship. And I think we need to clearly articulate that carers are part of that and an equal partnership in that relationship. And as I said right at the beginning, they quite often see and hear and notice things that people working in the system don't. So they're a rich source of intelligence.
They are indeed. I do have more questions, but I will pause there and turn to the audience and to see whether you have any questions for any or all of the panellists. Are there any questions? Yes. If we might be able to use one of the mics.
Thanks very much. I'm Kerry Wilcox with South Metro. Now that Sarah Louise has handed her microphone over, I'm going to ask her a question. I suppose part of what we all deal with, and it's been mentioned about how do we get the understanding of the care opinion feedback, the language used and the responses from the operational staff on the floor in what we all experience every day, particularly at the moment, how complex the system is and how very, very busy all of the staff are. And so Sarah Louise, I suppose, given your roles, how do you manage to get the operational level staff, the nurse manager and the CN group and those level staff to really look at and engage and understand?
That's a really good question.
If you want to repeat the question, or I'm happy to repeat it so our friends online can hear.
So Kerry asked around how do we get the operational coalface staff voice in the response. That is a really good question, and I think that's something that's always been important to me in all my roles, is to understand the experience. I think, but also conversely, to get the frontline staff to understand the patient experience. I think a lot of the, and in the formal feedback process that we have through our patient experience teams, a lot of the times the staff will come back, because it always goes to the nurse unit manager, or it goes to the head of the department, or it goes to the catering manager, or it goes to whoever. And a lot of the time the response you'll get, it's very process driven. It's very, oh, that doesn't meet with the Work Health Safety Act, and it, you know, those types of things, that we blocked the door, and et cetera, et cetera. But my response when I get that feedback from our clinicians and our teams is, I think we're missing the empathy there. And I know I've used that word a lot, but it's core of who I am as a human and how we're treating our humans and caring for our humans. So I try to go back and, because I think the context is important and it can explain things, but at the end of the day, the people are providing their experience and the humans are telling us how they felt. And sometimes a policy or procedure just really isn't going to help with that. So yeah, that's what I try to do. And I try to put myself back in that space, even that's a while ago, and understand where they're coming from as well. But then also use some of my own experiences as a patient or a client or a consumer or however, to inform how I might share the story with our clinicians and our teams. Like, if you were that person sitting in the waiting room for 8 hours and no one talked to you, would you be cross about that? Probably. Or, you know, if you're at the cafe and the barista isn't even like acknowledging you, that makes you cross, right? So how do you, I try and make it relevant to people's experience, because I think you just get super caught up. So that is what I try to do. Sometimes I think it's heard. And yeah, but also acknowledging, I think people hear a lot of the hard stuff, but also so always sharing the great stuff and how it makes them feel, you know. So
just building on that, would you do that organically throughout the day as required, or is there specific times allocated to doing it?
Oh, I'd like to think I had allocated time. No, it's all, you know, we're very fortunate that in my areas I have patient experience teams and quality and safety people that help me to get there and be timely, and because I think that's actually one of the most important things is timely response.
Absolutely.
And even if you don't have all the information, just being like, I've heard you, thank you. But yes, absolutely. I'll go find someone, you know, that's related to and be like, oh, hey, that, you know, can we just, how else can we respond to this in a way that's meaningful? Yeah.
So embedding into everyday practice. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, down the front here.
Hi guys, so I'm Kylie. I'm a maternity consumer representative and the consumer lead on the new Women's and Babies Hospital project. And I have a question for Alicia or Gloria around, sorry guys, just around some of the consumers that I speak to in regional remote areas. There is a real fear to use care opinion because it's in some small towns it's not actually anonymous, and they're quite fearful that if they put in their story on care opinion, it's going to be quite quickly recognisable by the clinicians, but they do want their story to be heard or improvements to be made at their local service. Have you got any suggestions for those consumers to alleviate that fear, or any ideas on how to encourage those consumers in those small towns to still use care opinion?
Oh, I'm happy to go first as a consumer. I think that's where I really appreciate the fact that the District Health Advisory Councils exist. I think we are in amongst the community, and a lot of the people on our council in particular, they're trusted members generally, and they're on there to provide that two-way feedback on. And it's not about just, I think what people inside of the system need to is welcome feedback as not complaints. It's a chance to improve. And I think that's really important. If the service listens and reflects and then sort of acts or changes are made, then I think consumers feel like, but I get your pain about the small fishbowl we all live in. And you are absolutely right about most people know everybody. But that, if you feel like there's somebody that you can trust, whether it's through the care opinion, I feel if the system says, give us your feedback, we're not going to blame you. It is, you feel more confident and trust. And that only comes from when I come to the service and the service says, I've had a bad experience, but the service says, provide us that feedback. Let's see what we can do. That welcoming, that feedback makes a huge difference. And I know it doesn't exist, but it's a work in progress like everything. So DHACs, trusted members of the community that everybody knows by name. Hey, Glor, you know, I had this, well, I'll tell you an example. I've got a friend who went down to Newman. Now, Newman's 400 k's away from us, 400 and plus k's away from us. Attended there with real serious pain, got discharged and was told, oh, she wanted to stay in, but was told, oh, you're fine, go. Had to get back to Headland, drive that car with her back issue, then got admitted into ED straight away when she landed here. Now, things like that, they don't write on Care Opinion, but they came back and says, Glor. And you know what was really, really heartening for me? Dr. Annie Lang, up in, and I'm name dropping, yes. I mentioned it to her and I said, what are we doing about transport when people, and you're not going to have RFDS, you're not going to have an AMBO go out, and drive you 400 Ks. So then she contacted the young lady and had a conversation about that. And then, the conversation started. We're not asked, they just want to be heard. And I think that's really important.
Thanks, Gloria. No, that's all right. I think the strength and the value that our District Health Advisory Councils bring for country consumers and the voices of people is so critical. I'd also just encourage Kylie that people reach out and say, I want to tell my story, but I'm not sure where to start. Could someone get in touch with me? And I think, again, we always try and provide a contact and a person, photo and a name for that response, and then follow through that person is the one to contact. And I think that could start with a conversation. And I can really understand why people, especially in country towns and small communities, why they're really scared and hesitant. I think we are really breaking it down though and trying to move away from the us and them. And I think we've had some really great successes where when we talk with carers and consumers and members of the community, when they have built up the confidence and we've heard their story and then actually said to them, would you like to speak to the people involved in the care, or we can pass that through. What I found is the clinicians often know things were challenging and difficult. They want to learn, they want to improve, and they're actually afraid of reaching out and the same thing. So, I just really welcome people to just start the conversation, and it's a responsibility of people like myself in the senior positions as well to really empower our team members to make sure we're supporting consumers that do that. So that's a responsibility that I definitely take on, and I think that's where we need to really make sure that the platform, the voice and the message that we've heard today about the importance of consumer and carer input really holds fast.
I think something really important with regards to these smaller communities is the way that news travels. So if a consumer is empowered to share their voice and they get a good experience, the services are more open to it, then they share that with their neighbour and with their friends. So within that community, like a ripple effect, it will be. We have a culture created here with our health services that are open to hearing the feedback. So hopefully over time, that culture is embedded within these small communities, empowering them to share. Please.
Hi, I'm Claire from Health Consumers Council. Touching on that, then building on the questions so far, one of the things I'm struck by is that particularly when a system is in high demand, there's a lot of pressure, and people are working flat out. To get feedback that's less than positive can, I imagine, be quite challenging. I know it is for me. Like sometimes I might be inclined to go, oh, for God's sake, like I'm doing my best. But I have an experience of me giving some feedback to some health, in a healthcare setting where I'd been hearing some things from the community, and I shared it with a group of staff, and I sort of said, oh, well, I've been hearing that people would like more about this. And I had two responses in the room. One person went, well, that's not right, because we're really good at that. And the other person said, that's really interesting, because I would have said we're really good at that. But that's obviously not what people are experiencing. And I guess I'm interested in your perspectives as, you know, people within organisations, and how do we support everyone to be able to tolerate feedback that is less than positive, but that has nuggets of importance that can be used as a learning moment. Because I guess what I observed in that encounter that I had was, you know, sort of somebody probably pretty exhausted and someone able to draw on a bit more reserves and not take it so personally. So I think it's really important for all sorts of consumer feedback. And I think my observation too is very often, I think consumers, and particularly when they're on perhaps on councils or committees, sometimes feel they have to really manage how they give the feedback so that it's able to be heard in a way that's not taking offence. What can we do to support that more, like you say, that openness, that curiosity, rather than really we're doing our best?
Can I get started? Is that all right? Yeah. You made me realise that curiosity and compassion are two of the values for WA Country Health Service, and I think that there's a real reason for that, and it's really needed particularly, like we said, in country areas. Oftentimes, you're only 1 degree separation away from the person that was the client, the person that was the staff member. They usually know each other as well. I would sort of speak to some of the processes that WA Country Health Service have actually put in place since over the past 10 years as well. I mean, we have a patient experience and consumer or community engagement team as well, very small, but the work that they do is so powerful and actually proactive. And Care Opinion's one of the platforms and one of the tools that's really used to drive that and that they've supported, but that real empowering people and the strength that comes from teaching our staff and teaching our consumers not to take it personally, and that to lean into that curiosity. And I actually think that you've got an opportunity every time that there's an engagement on a platform, but also proactively as well, that as health services, we actually need to be responsible for training, teaching, supporting our clinicians and our staff members, our non-clinical staff as well. Don't be afraid, don't be defensive, actually listen, be curious, be compassionate. There's always two sides to the story, and you won't get in trouble, because I think that's often been a big part of it, is that when people go into a bureaucratic and hierarchical organisation, you know, we're trained from childhood to think we're going to get in trouble. So it's really proactively working through that and empowering people. And I think we've come so far. But I think that's one of the really important strategies to take through into the next 10 years as well.
Thank you for that. I do have a question from online guests. So thank you, Tony, for your question. It is to any of the panel members. On occasions, clinicians are concerned with the content of the Care Opinion story, but can't work out who the patient is from the information. Any suggestions on how this could be minimised? So it is anonymous.
I can take that one to begin with. I think that's a good question, Tony. And I think when I first started reading Care Opinions, I was like, oh, who was that? Oh my gosh, how can I find out who that was? And I think I've kind of shifted my perception of reading them. So it's more about hearing their story and understanding that they are trying to tell us as an organisation in a way that feels comfortable for them. They're giving their feedback about how they, you know, whether it's, you know, positive or, you know, some constructive feedback in a way that is meaningful to them, accessible to them. But we always do pop something down at the bottom, which is, you know, we do have our formal processes. If there's anything else that you'd like to engage with us, then we'd love to hear from you. Sometimes, though, there are really concerning things. And I know that they're moderated by Care Opinion and, you know, depending on their criticality and all those types of things. And if there is anything that I feel like I need to know, I will strongly encourage people to give that feedback, either in a different way, in a way that they can feel comfortable doing, lots of different avenues, whether they want a phone call or, you know, whatever. Because I as a going from clinician to manager to leader, you're like, oh my God, how can I make that better? Or that was a terrible experience for them, and think about the individual, which I think is important, but it's almost about the greater good as well, and those themes and narratives. But sometimes you're like, I think you've got to check yourself as well, and going back to the previous question, sitting in that space, it's like, it's not always personal. This is their experience. Just sitting with that and understanding the experience is part of it, and trying to put yourself in that I think is important. But thank you, Tony.
Thank you for that, and thank you for the question, Tony. I think Fraser also alluded to this. The first thing that comes to our mind is who left who could that be? But if we have a shift in that mindset, it's about the story. Let's hear, let's listen to what it's trying to tell us rather than who is trying to say it. So what we might do is thank our panellists for sharing their insights, for their openness, and for really being champions, being leaders in the work that you do to amplifying the consumer voice and supporting us to be responsive to consumer needs. We will take a 10-minute break and then reconvene. So thank you very much. Thank you for coming back, and glad you've brought your cup of tea, meat pie, banana bread back in. Please continue to enjoy them as we commence the next panel discussion. In the previous session, we explored how consumer voice is embedded at a governance level, and this session takes that a step further into how that is experienced and applied in practice. So we'll be hearing from a panel working across different parts of the system, from those directly responding to the feedback through to those shaping how consumer voice is used at the system level. So joining us on this panel, we have Delaney Gibbons, Director, Safety, Quality and Performance, NMHS. Delaney, please make your way up. We have Emma Ball, Safety and Quality Lead at SMHS. We have Tanya Harris, Engagement Manager, Health Consumers Council, WA. Thanks, Tanya. And Karina Moore, Acting Director, Health Networks, Clinical Excellence Department of Health, WA. Please make welcome our panellists. Thank you for joining us this morning and welcome. Okay, again, I've got a few questions that I will commence by asking our panellists, but in the meantime, please feel free to think about any questions that you may have, so there will be an opportunity for you to ask them. Okay, the first question is for Karina. From a systems perspective, how does narrative feedback, including through platforms like Care Opinion, fit within the broader approach to consumer feedback and engagement across WA Health?
Thank you for that question on notice, because it gave me an opportunity to reflect on my experience of receiving consumer and carer feedback. I was actually born in the dark ages, so my experience in this space spans a couple of centuries. And when I think about my first experience of receiving feedback, I worked in the complaints unit at Royal Perth Hospital for 3 months. And we thought we were amazing and innovative because when people wrote to us and raised a concern or a complaint, the first thing we thought was amazing was that we responded to them within 7 days to say we'd received their complaint. And then the other amazing thing we did was get all the people in the room, the clinical people, the person raising the concern, to have a conversation about what happened and come to an agreement on the best way forward, to offer apology to someone's face. So, pretty amazing for, the sort of end of the 90s to be taking that approach. And when I think about where we are now compared to then, it's pretty small fry really, isn't it? So, we have, when Care Opinion came along, we had very sophisticated, compared to that, ways of gathering feedback from our consumers. And I think, like the experience of bringing everyone into the room together, there was no opportunity for everyone to learn from the compliment as well as the concern that was raised. I think that's the thing that Care Opinion has. It's the most innovative thing that has been brought to WA Health. That opportunity for the stories to be shared on the World Wide Web for everyone to read, the responses. We also have through, I think, practice and exposure and learning, a more sophisticated way of responding to concerns and compliments. You see that maturity over the years and the responses that come back from the various health services. And I think we have the opportunity to also recognise what I would consider happy circumstances or happy coincidence. So in someone sharing their story, a health service responding, and then also making the change that's required or celebrating the success from the compliment, we can have other spin-off effects. And I think about a story in particular that came through in the early days. Is a simple thing. Someone just wanted to have a bench seat between the car park and the respiratory clinic that they attended every 3 months because they just got short of breath coming from the car park. So the bench went in, hugely complimentary about that. And when you think about what other happy circumstance may have occurred from having a bench seat there, maybe there's an old frail person that also struggled to get from the car park. Maybe we've prevented them from having a fall because they've been able to stop and rest. And we can kind of capture the changes from the stories, but I think there's other aspects that there's a sophistication that the storytelling brings that we're yet to capture. But I think that's probably the best change and the best, I guess, happy circumstance of adding Care Opinion to our more quantitative closed circuit ways of capturing feedback.
Thank you, Karina. Tanya, I'll come to you on that. From a consumer perspective, Tanya, what role does support and advocacy play in helping people share their experience, particularly when they might not feel confident or safe doing so on their own?
Thank you. I think being able to support people to share their experience and their story of what has happened is really important, something that we take really seriously, obviously, at Health Consumers Council. Stories are very important, experiences are very important. And I think the value of Care Opinion in that you're sharing the whole story. Some things are not necessarily complaints and they're not necessarily compliments. They're everything. Care Opinion, because it's anonymous, can be, a real benefit to that. People may not want to put their name to it, might not necessarily it's not an investigation. They don't want it investigated. They want to be heard, as we've heard a lot today. I think being able to support people who may not otherwise give feedback or share their experiences with health services is really important. We include Care Opinion and how to use it in most of the training that we do with consumers, and for a lot of them it's the first time they've seen it, and people really love it. They like that they can go on there and share it. They like that they can see who's responded to it, where it's been sent and who's read it. I think that's a really important part, quite an empowering thing to know that the executive director of the health service read this and they're the ones that are responding. To know who's responding can be a really quite a powerful thing. I think there are always going to be, getting feedback is such a gift. Most people don't give feedback. And we know, like you do a workshop, we were talking about it the other day at work, and you've got, 40% of people give feedback. And we're sitting there like literally in the room with time to give feedback and people still don't. It's quite uncommon. And so the feedback that people go out of their way to share a story on, Care Opinion or put in a complaint or I think is a real gift. It's rare and it needs to be sort of treated, I think, as that. And Care Opinion's one way. There are lots of ways of giving feedback and but Care Opinion is a very important way and we really love it, and consumers really do as well.
Thank you, Tanya, and I think you've said it beautifully in that it is a gift, and if we embrace it, then and use it, it can be quite a powerful one. And the point of difference is the dialogue. It's two-way. When you complete a survey, we often have consumers say, "What happens to it? Where does it go?" Whereas with this, they're able to engage with it, see who's responded, what they've done with it. So it's really closing that loop in that dialogue. Emma, your work is in the community setting, and we receive many stories by phone from older patients and their loved ones about the rehabilitation and the home service. What led you to start using Care Opinion, and what were you hoping it would help you with?
I think for us, when we first started trying to look for consumer feedback in the community, we were looking to open up some accessible platforms for our consumers. Firstly, just to increase the amount of feedback that we got, and also so that we could get some richer feedback from our consumers. You know, using Care Opinion, they can give their own words, they can give a deeper understanding of the care that we've provided to them. We found it's much better with Care Opinion for our older demographic of patients that we have. They seem to prefer giving verbal feedback, or like was mentioned earlier, they like writing long letters or emails. And it's a bit nicer for our patients to give that personalization. There's normally set questions with other surveys that we use. So we find that they can really talk about their story and share what they've experienced. And yeah, it removes the barrier. It allows them to, we actually have a lot of patients or clients that ring up and they give verbal feedback to Care Opinion, which is then entered into the system for us, which is amazing. I think also I'd really like to touch on the fact that then we get to discuss this feedback at our team meetings, and also our stories are shared with those people that are non-clinical or corporate, so up to executive level. So they all get to see the care that's being given to patients on the front line by those staff. And it really starts to close that gap between understanding at that higher level that care that we are providing. And yeah, it makes sure that the consumer voices are heard, whether that's where we need some improvement in areas or where we've really outshone what the standard would have been. Yeah, and it allows us to do some deeper reflection and learning on the care that we're providing. And it really keeps the consumer experience at the heart of all of our improvements and at the care that we're giving to keep that high level that we provide.
Thank you for that, Emma. The next question is for Delaney. We see many stories from women and newborn health service where staff are recognised by name. What has public recognition through stories on Care Opinion done for your staff and the team's culture?
Thank you. I think I can address this at both the individual, the team, and the service level. So for individuals, we know that it means a lot to them individually because they tell us how much it means to them. We will do certificates. So we'll do a Care Opinion certificate for every staff member who is named personally, where it's signed by me as the Director of Safety and Quality and the senior lead of that service. And we put the story on the back so that they have that certificate with the patient's own words to keep in their portfolio, both from a reflection piece, but also because it feels good. And on those hard days, you have something physically tangible that reminds you of the good and why you do what you do. Within teams, there's lots of different celebrations. We have teams that will do morning teas where they celebrate someone who's had multiple positive stories, much like the mug. That's one way that the team has adopted that celebration. We have another team who, in a different part of the service, who have a Microsoft Teams channel for all their regular communications. And one of the channels is the Anya channel, where any feedback they get positive that names an individual gets posted in that channel, and then all of their peers will go on, and you'll see there'll be 10, 20, 30 of their peers that work in their immediate area giving it a thumbs up, a love heart, way to go, that's such great feedback, you're amazing. And so teams have taken it upon themselves to embed that celebration amongst themselves as part of the culture at a team level. Then from an organizational level, we've worked really hard to build that patient feedback into the day-to-day of what we do. So like most hospitals, we have sort of a daily stand-up, a daily huddle where we look at bed pressures, staffing pressures, activity. But once a week, Tuesdays is our patient experience day, where we bring up generally a care opinion story or a compliment and use that as a reflection. And we deliberately try to pick stories, that over time celebrate the breadth of the organization. We have some teams that get an abundance of positive feedback. We make sure it's not their story showed every single week, which we could do, but make sure that we share stories that in particular cover a patient's journey. You know, I came in for X and I came in through the emergency center and then I went to theater and then I went to the ward and then I had follow up at home. And the stories where individuals are named, we try to pick those stories specifically because that promotes a culture where if Nurse Jane is walking down the hall the next day, someone can say, I heard that great feedback from you. That was amazing. And that we really make sure that we're reinforcing that positive experience in everything we do. So I think really making that patient experience part of the daily focus. And then what we see is it makes staff want to promote patient feedback. So one example, recently I was doing some rounding and ended up in an area where we get very little feedback from. But we were talking about patient experience and patient feedback, and the staff member actually flipped her lanyard over. And on the back of the little plastic ID card holder, their team had printed out QR codes. Independently, they'd done it completely of their own accord, that had a link to the feedback page on the website, which has the consumer liaison, links to Health Consumers Council, links to Care Opinion, all of the main feedback mechanisms. And this was our visiting midwifery service who go out and do home visits. And so they're able to, at the end of the visit in someone's home, go, if you have anything to share about any point of your journey, here, take a picture of this when you have time. If you'd like to give us feedback, please do. And they did this of their own accord. They just went, hey, we could slap this on our lanyard. And it's things like that that demonstrate, I think, that we're on the right path and that people are open to that feedback, because that is the mechanism for all feedback, not just positive, but they're willing to really promote that in people's homes as we want to hear from you. Please let us know.
Fabulous. That was a lot of gems were shared there. And I mean, you share it so beautifully, but I think it may have taken quite a bit to get to a culture where your teams are embracing this. They're welcoming this feedback. And yeah, so it says a lot about the leadership and a lot about the way your organisation is leading by listening to the voice of consumers. Do we have any questions from the audience to any or all of the panellists? We have a mic that Meg will bring around. Yep. Yes, please. Yeah, no, we do have a...
Just talking about translation of and closing the loop back with consumers. So with Care Opinion, the consumer puts up their story and then they get a response from the service, and then you may or may not make changes based on that feedback. Is there a way that we can use Care Opinion so that we can close that loop back with those consumers? Because some of this stuff or changes might happen months, even a year later. Is there a way that we, even though it's anonymous, how can we use the platform to close that loop more solidly?
We do. Would you like to share some examples on how some of the changes don't happen immediately, or what occurs is there are trends or patterns in some of the suggestions, and over time those changes are made and feedback is kept, is updated. Is there any examples you'd like to share? Thank you.
In health networks, when we got involved in purchasing Care Opinion for the state, we developed a dashboard on the Healthy WA website and also on the internal website. It displays how many stories for each health service and how many responses or watches of those stories. And there's also an indicator for how many changes have been made. I think that indicator probably is our weakest one for the reasons that you've already stated. You know, sometimes the change happens much later. Sometimes it's just hard to capture, or quite a significant change needs to occur, which can take months rather than weeks. But that's one mechanism that we use. I think the other one that I'm aware of is, you know, and I reflect on, you know, it's the little things that change culture, and, you know, QR codes on lanyards. You know, we often reflect on stories at various meetings. So we have a care opinion story when we commence our advisory group meetings we're developing a strategy in neurology for the state at the moment. So we try and share a story from that area. Similarly, there's some quality and safety committees I sit on, and there's always a story that's shared at the beginning of the committee that helps us to not only be reminded of who we're serving, but also it can stimulate that you know, ideas for change based on the person's concern or compliment. It helps us identify exemplars as well.
Thank you. Any other examples from the audience of how this may occur within your services, where you've got a series or one story shared and there is a change but it occurs later? How do you go back and close that loop?
So just on that, sorry, I work at Midland Hospital in the patient experience team, and sometimes people don't want to be contacted again. I think we need to respect that side of things, that quite often if we do put a response and say, please contact us, please reach out, we're looking at it, we either don't get a response, or if we do get a response, it's thank you for acknowledging it, I'm moving on with my life now. I don't want this brought up with me again. I've shared this. I'm not moving forward. However, a lot of people do want to know. And so I think it's a balance between reading the room in terms of do they want a response, and saying that if we are going to get back to you, we do that, and in the most timely manner possible. And I think when you don't get back to people when they've requested it, or keep them updated, I know it goes a bit off topic, but recently, like in SAC1 investigations and those sorts of things, people just want to know that they're still on your books, pretty much, and that we're still looking into it. You check in where you can. But I think there is an element of sometimes too much information is not required, and we need to respect that they've said what they need to say, and then we take it from there.
So communication 101 is just keep everyone in the loop. Yes, Claire?
I wonder, it occurs to me, I wonder whether or not, for example, being able to connect back in with the community advisory councils and or the district health advisory councils might be a way of at least closing the loop back to community. We all know that there's lots and lots and lots of reports that are done in health, and a predecessor of mine, Pip Brennan, who many of you will know, at one point we talked about, you know, wonder if we should have like recommendation watch, which is like, let's just keep a list of all the recommendations that have been made and go through them every so often and say, how's that one going? How's that one going? But you could do that with care opinion. Where a change is planned, it could become the opportunity for the CAC or the DHAC to become a little bit of the watchers to some extent, which is just to, you know, be a mechanism by which it's at least getting fed back to community.
Thanks for sharing that, Claire. And we might have one more question if there is anything from the audience. Yes, Neil.
So it's just more of an example. I really wanted to build on Emma's point. Thanks, Emma. So thanks in a large part to Leslie's leadership at East Metro. Our area executive group always starts after the acknowledgement with a care opinion story, and it rotates around all of the executives. So they have to take ownership for the story, present the story. And these aren't the sugar-coated ones. So they give us an opportunity to review and learn across the entire executive, so we all own the issues. So it's really great practice.
Yeah, Fabulous. Another great example. Thank you very much for sharing that. We have run out of time for this session, so please join me in thanking our panelists for sharing those insights and experiences and for bringing to life what consumer voice looks like in practice across the various settings. We're most appreciative for your time and your contribution. Thank you. So I would like to take this opportunity on behalf of the Care Opinion team in Australia to thank you all for being present, for your generous contribution to the discussions today. I'd like to thank Alia for the warm welcome that you provided us. Thank you so much. It was really heartwarming. Thanks again to our partners, Health Consumers Council, WA, Department of Health, WA. Thanks to all our panelists for being available and sharing your rich insights. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank the Care Opinion team. So we have a small team back in Brisbane led by Rebecca Somerville, who's our National Manager here today. We have Sarah and Ellen, all super passionate individuals who really care and are just so committed to making this work. And I'm eternally grateful for their hard work every day and for making this forum possible. So thank you very much to them. Also Meg, who's here from the Care Opinion AgPal team. And supporting us, and we'll be engaging with you moving forward as well. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to share the morning with you and to hear from you and to connect. And the conversations don't end here. So we will have a post-forum engagement and ongoing regular engagements. We had a stakeholder roundtable discussion last night, and we're able to draw some really rich insights there about things that we can do to facilitate more engagement between services, among consumers, among care providers, to really deepen the ripple effect that we can have with this platform and to embed it more effectively. And so the opportunity now is to continue the conversations, to build on what we've done and carry this thinking into practices and the services and the teams that we lead. Strengthening consumer voice is ongoing work. It requires effort. It's got to be front of mind. Time needs to be allowed for it. But if it is embedded effectively, it shouldn't be yet another thing you do. It becomes the core of what you do. And so continue the collaboration, lead and be the change agents that you are, but bring a few more to helping you make the change in your organisations and across the state. Thank you again for your contributions, and continue networking throughout the lunch period. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you.